This story is about a black mechanic in Detroit who was publicly mocked by a corporate engineer during a company-wide meeting live on camera. What began as a cruel joke about his worth turned into a movement that exposed sabotage, shattered old hierarchies, and rebuilt an entire company from the inside out. In the end, it wasn't a degree that changed everything. It was dignity, grit, and a quiet refusal to stay in his place. "You fix that engine, Malik, and I'll marry you." The laughter that followed wasn't just casual. It was brutal, echoing through the cold walls of Veritas Motors headquarters like a thunderclap of arrogance. Every eye in the room turned to the man standing by the workshop bay, grease on his hands, calm in his face. Malik Evans didn't even flinch. He just looked at the prototype engine, then slowly back at Catherine Hale, the lead engineer in her pressed white coat and bright lipstick phone pointed straight at his face. "I'm recording this, by the way," she added, smirking. "When you fail, I want everyone to see what happens when a parts guy pretends to be an engineer." The whole department burst into another wave of snickering. Malik said nothing. He hadn't come here to spar with words. He came because someone mentioned his name in a meeting, suggesting that even that old mechanic down on Mack Avenue might have a better shot at fixing the stalled prototype than the whole research team had in 3 weeks. The joke had ignited a storm, and Catherine had seized on it, not to fix the engine, but to make a public spectacle. Malik was 42, with salt creeping into his beard, and knuckles calloused from 2 decades of underhood labor. He didn't wear a lab coat. His name didn't sit on a LinkedIn profile with Ivy League credentials. But he'd rebuilt machines that were declared dead red engine blocks, like they were stories. And this so-called unsalvageable electric motor was talking to him already. He looked around the sterile room of techs and analysts. They saw a man out of place too, old school, too black, too street-taught to belong in their world of patents and predictive software. Catherine grinned again. "You've got 5 days, Malik. 5. Do what my team of engineers with actual degrees couldn't do in 3 weeks. Let's show everyone what happens when fantasy meets reality." But the fantasy wasn't Malik's. As the crowd dispersed, Malik touched the frame of the prototype, gently, almost like it was a living thing. It had been stripped, analyzed, digitally scanned, and still no one could get it to start. But something didn't sit right. He'd seen dozens of failures in his life, but this one wasn't honest. The damage looked planted. Still, there was something deeper. He wasn't just being tested on a machine. He was being dared to prove that his kind of intelligence manual, intuitive, unpolished, didn't belong. Catherine's little marriage quip wasn't about romance. It was ownership. It was a way of saying, even if you win, we'll turn it into a joke. That night, Malik sat in the cramped apartment he shared with his 13-year-old son, Jalen. The TV was off. Dinner was quiet. Then, Jalen slid his phone across the table. His eyes were red. "Dad, you're all over the company's TikTok page. They made a meme out of you." Malik picked up the phone and saw it looped footage of Catherine laughing captions, reading miracle mechanic auditions for NASA, and coming soon to a garage near you. Fail. The laughter wasn't just in the room anymore. It was in the cloud, viral, weaponized. Malik didn't flinch. He reached across the table and squeezed his son's shoulder. "Don't let them in your head," he said. "People who feel small will always try to make someone else smaller." But in his chest, the old wound stirred that same cold fire from 5 years ago, when Linda, his wife, was denied advanced care because their insurance didn't cover the better clinic. She had died before they even finished the intake forms. He hadn't screamed then either. He just memorized every name on that hospital wall. Now, in this new battle, he was doing the same. At Veritas, the jokes continued. Internal Slack messages lit up. Rebecca from HR shared a link to a Google Doc titled "Wedding Playlist for Malik and Catherine," filled with ironic song titles like "Let's Get It On" and "Off the Floor" and "Fix You." No one stopped it. Some egged it on. It wasn't just Catherine. The system was complicit. But what no one noticed was that while they laughed, Malik had already started pulling blueprints. The ones available in public patent archives. the ones buried in press releases. He didn't have access to the proprietary Veritas software, but he didn't need it. He had intuition. He had 30 years of mechanical muscle memory. And he had something else, the creeping suspicion that this wasn't a technical failure. It was sabotage. On day 1, he worked late into the night. On day 2, he opened up the casings and photographed the parts. And what he found made his chest tighten. 3 critical sensors were intentionally scratched so subtly it would pass for wear. A capacitor had been replaced with a lower-grade clone designed to fail under load. It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted this motor to look like a design failure. Malik held the fried part up to the light. Whoever did this, he whispered, knew exactly where to hit it. And exactly who would take the fall. Then he remembered something his wife once told him. Sometimes the lie isn't just about what they say. It's about who they want people to stop believing in. He took a deep breath and kept going. Because fixing the engine wasn't the point anymore. He was going to fix the system. Malik knew fixing the engine wasn't the point anymore. He was going to fix the system. But systems don't break cleanly. They rot from the inside, one compromised choice at a time, until silence becomes policy. And somewhere deep inside Veritas Motors, someone had gotten very comfortable betting no one like him would ever look close enough to notice. By Tuesday morning, the jokes had escalated. Catherine created a company-wide WhatsApp group called Miracle Mechanic Watch and added every department head. The group's icon was a stock image of a confused-looking handyman holding a wrench upside down. At 9:00 a.m., she posted day 2. He's probably still looking for the on switch, followed by a torrent of laughing emojis and meme replies from other execs. None of it surprised Malik. He'd seen it before, prejudice wrapped in professionalism, bullying disguised as workplace culture. But what he hadn't expected was the knock on his workshop door that afternoon. Yvonne Carter, once the most respected black female engineer at Veritas, stood there with a quiet steel in her eyes. Retired for 6 years, her exit had been quietly brushed under the rug after an internal restructuring. But Malik remembered her name. Everyone on the shop floor did. "I heard about what they're doing to you," she said simply. "I know what that engine looks like on the inside. Mind if I take a look?" Inside, Yvonne traced her fingers along the same burn marks Malik had documented. Her brow furrowed. "This isn't just damage. This is a signature. I saw the same sabotage pattern 12 years ago when our department's prototype failed just before launch. We thought it was our fault. Then suddenly, the whole project got reassigned. And someone else got the patent bonus." Malik's jaw tightened. "You know who?" Yvonne nodded slowly. "I have suspicions. But you're not the only one they've tried to erase." She reached into her bag and pulled out a battered notebook. "These are the projects I led. And the ones I never got credit for." The pages were full of diagrams, timelines, and team rosters. It wasn't just Malik. There had been others: engineers, tech leads, interns, people of color, women. Every time a project had trouble, leadership shifted, and someone else reaped the reward. By nightfall, Malik and Yvonne were joined by another unlikely ally, Lynn Tran, a 27-year-old systems engineer who had quietly left Veritas after being overlooked for a promotion twice. Lynn had seen Catherine manipulate resource allocations, slow down progress, then blame the original leads for missed benchmarks. "I stayed quiet," Lynn admitted. "But when I saw what they're doing to you, I realized they count on that. They count on us disappearing." Malik didn't smile, but there was something sharper in his posture now. "We're not disappearing this time." They worked side by side through the night, cross-referencing old maintenance logs with Yvonne's notes, matching failure patterns, and cataloging evidence. But it wasn't enough to have the truth. They needed to prove it in a way no one could deny. So on Wednesday morning, Malik did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up the phone and called someone from the outside. "Professor Fields," he asked. The voice on the line was warm-aged and alert. "Malik Evans." "Been a long time." Dr. Warren Fields had once taught at Wayne State and was now an independent consultant on technical ethics and corporate oversight. He had a reputation for being unbuyable and unafraid. Malik didn't waste time. "I've got a motor that was sabotaged. I've got logs, witnesses, and a paper trail. But I need this airtight. Because I'm not just going to fix an engine. I'm going to drag the truth through the front doors of Veritas on camera." There was a pause. "Then, I'll be at your shop in an hour." Meanwhile, across town, Catherine Hale was basking in her rising spotlight. That same morning, she went live on a local radio segment, laughing her way through the story of the mechanic who thinks he's Tony Stark. She ended the call with a jab about the importance of education and how not everyone is built for innovation. She didn't know that Professor Fields was already reviewing component photographs and verifying digital timestamps. Or that Lynn had recovered a deleted Slack message from Catherine, ordering a reallocation of sensors from the prototype, hours before its final test. By Wednesday night, Yvonne pulled Malik aside. "We have enough to go public. But once this starts, there's no going back." Malik looked at the wall where his late wife's photo still hung next to a dusty engineering award he never talked about. "I didn't ask for war," he said. "But if they want one, they'll get it. Just not the kind they're used to." And as he turned back to the engine hands, steady heart sharp, Malik understood something. This wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about exposing who broke it on purpose. Malik understood. This wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about exposing who broke it on purpose. And exposing truth in a place built on silence required more than courage. It required timing precision, and the kind of calm that came not from lack of fear, but from living with it long enough to recognize its rhythm. By Thursday morning, Malik, Yvonne, Lynn, and Dr. Fields had finalized what they were calling the package, a meticulously documented case of deliberate internal sabotage at Veritas Motors, backed by photographic evidence, recovered internal messages, employee testimonies, and maintenance records spanning 5 years. But what turned it from accusation into reckoning was the pattern it always targeted: one type of person: women, minorities, the ones who weren't supposed to lead. Every time a promising project helmed by someone like Yvonne or Lynn began to gain momentum, something went wrong. Parts failed. Tests glitched. Blame fell silently. Promotions were rescinded. And in every instance, someone else, someone already entrenched, picked up the scraps and turned them into bonuses. Malik stood at the center of a web that had been hidden in plain sight. But while he was preparing to strike, Catherine doubled down. That same morning, she created a public Facebook event titled "Wedding of the Century Engineer, Mary's Mechanic." It was scheduled for Friday at 2:00 p.m. inside the Veritas Motor Prototype Lab. The event description read, "One man's journey from the garage to corporate glory, and back again. Witness what happens when imagination collides with reality and fails spectacularly." She live-streamed herself laughing while picking out a cheap plastic bouquet at a convenience store. "Just something quick for the 5-second ceremony," she joked. "Say, 'I told you so,' and we're done." It wasn't just mockery anymore. It was institutional theater. She'd weaponized the whole workplace into an audience. Malik's son Jalen, now fully aware of the storm brewing around his father, had quietly taken a back seat. But that night, he knocked on the garage door with something in his hands. "Dad," he said softly, I made something for tomorrow." He held up a flash drive. "I took all the posts from her WhatsApp group, the ones she tried to delete. I screenshotted everything. Even got some of the audio from that video where she makes fun of how you talk." His voice faltered. It's bad, Dad." Malik took the flash drive gently, his throat tightening. Not just from pride, but from knowing Jalen had inherited his mother's quiet instinct for truth. "You sure you're okay with this?" he asked. "I'm not doing it for you," Jalen said, voice steady. "I'm doing it so the next kid doesn't think being smart with your hands makes you less than smart on paper." That night, the small garage became a war room. Screens lit up with timelines, messages, circuit diagrams. Dr. Fields worked late, verifying metadata and timestamps. Lynn organized the exhibit order. Yvonne checked every printed document 3 times. Jalen edited the final compilation video, overlaying footage quotes, reaction clips. But what Malik did next surprised them all. He sat down and began to write. Not a speech, not a lawsuit. A letter. To Catherine. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't rage. It was something else entirely: clarity. In it, he wrote about what it meant to be underestimated, what it cost to be mocked for being where you don't belong. He wrote about Linda, and the day he realized the system didn't just fail, it was built to fail people like them. And he ended it, not with a threat, but with a line that none of them would ever forget. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one who never needed to raise his voice to be right. Friday arrived fast. Catherine came in, wearing her now signature red blazer, beaming as if she were about to receive an award. She'd hired a freelance videographer to capture the wedding, and even asked the intern to stream it live on Veritas's YouTube channel. There were over 100 people crammed into the prototype bay. Employees, investors, a few journalists tipped off about the corporate stunt. Jake, her loyal assistant, handed her the bouquet like it was a microphone. "Showtime," he whispered. And that's when Malik walked in. Coveralls stained with engine grease, toolbox in one hand, envelope in the other. He was calm, centered, like he'd already seen the end of this story and knew it wouldn't be theirs to write anymore. He nodded to the cameraman, to the crowd, to Catherine. Then gently, he set the toolbox down and reached for the truth. Malik reached for the truth, calmly, deliberately, like a man not trying to win, but to reveal. And when he pulled the first photo from the envelope, the energy in the room shifted. You could feel it in the way people stopped smiling, how the laughter fell quiet, like a broken record skipping into silence. This engine didn't fail. Malik said, his voice low but steady, carrying through the warehouse like a fuse slowly burning. It was made to. He walked to the projector Angela had loaned him, connected it to his phone, and dimmed the lights with a quiet nod to Lynn at the breaker. The screen flickered, and then there it was. A close-up photo of a damaged pressure sensor, its casing split in a way that looked natural to the untrained eye. But beside it was the same component in pristine condition. This part wasn't defective, he said. It was swapped, deliberately. The replacement had a thermal tolerance 15% lower than spec, just enough to fail under test pressure. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Catherine stiffened, still holding her bouquet. Malik tapped the clicker. The next slide showed 3 more parts, each marked with a digital timestamp and a breakdown of failure triggers. I've spent the past 5 nights going over every centimeter of this system, and what I found wasn't incompetence or miscommunication. It was a pattern, a repeatable sequence of substitutions, delays, and reroutes, all designed to simulate natural failure, while pointing blame at whoever was running the project. He turned to the crowd. And it wasn't just this project. Yvonne stepped forward and handed him a folder. These are 8 other case files from the last 5 years' projects that were quietly killed after mysterious malfunctions. All of them had one thing in common. They were led by engineers like me, like Yvonne, like Lynn. At that moment, Professor Fields emerged from the side of the room, holding a notarized affidavit. As an independent consultant and former ethics chair at Wayne State Fields, said, "I've reviewed this evidence, verified the source data, and can confirm that the pattern constitutes not only sabotage, but intentional career obstruction based on race and gender." The silence was suffocating. Then came the twist. Lynn stepped to the front and played a short audio recording. Catherine's voice, unmistakable, could be heard saying, "Don't worry about Malik. I swapped the sensor before they pulled him in. He'll fry the system and take the fall. This'll be fun." Gasps. Even Jake, who had been grinning a second ago, looked like his blood had drained to his feet. "I was afraid," Lynn said, quietly looking down. "But I recorded it that day. I didn't think I'd need it, until I saw how far she'd go." Catherine dropped the bouquet. That's edited. That's out of context." But it wasn't. Because the next video wasn't an edit. It was her live stream from the day before. In it, she mocked Malik's speech pattern, pantomimed exaggerated gestures, and suggested that guys like him were only useful when the bathroom sink backs up. It played in front of her entire department, in front of company executives, in front of cameras. Her laugh, so sharp and smug just 24 hours ago now, echoed like a siren of her own downfall. Malik turned slowly. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came for truth. And for every engineer who was told to know their place. For every idea that was stolen. Every future that was crushed quietly behind HR memos and fake deadlines." Then came the final blow. He opened his toolbox, attached the final relay, and turned the key. The engine roared. Not sputtered, not groaned. Roared clean strong and impossibly smooth. Gasps turned to stunned silence. "I didn't just fix it," Malik said. "I optimized it. It now runs 15% more efficiently. And I did it without your lab, without your software, and without your permission." Catherine collapsed into a chair. Jake stammered. "We didn't know. We thought it was just a joke." Malik looked him dead in the eyes. "You humiliated my son. You erased my wife's legacy. You tried to end me in front of a camera. That's not a joke. That's systemic cruelty." He stepped back. The projection shifted. Jalen had stitched together every deleted post, every mocking message, every meme Catherine and Jake had created. It played across the screen like a courtroom exhibit. Screenshots, private messages, racist emojis, internal Slack threads where they joked about cleaning out the diversity hires. Then came the final slide, a letter signed by the Department of Labor, acknowledging an open investigation into Veritas Motors for systemic discrimination and internal sabotage. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't move. They just sat in it. All of it. And Malik. He just stood there, silent, still, complete. Because when you carry the truth with enough patience and proof, you don't need to raise your voice. You just have to make sure no one can look away. No one could look away. Not from the evidence. Not from the engine's perfect hum. Not from the man who had just dismantled an entire system of cruelty, without shouting, without insults, without hate, only precision. Malik didn't need to claim victory. The truth had done it for him. But the fallout was just beginning. Veritas Motors' boardroom was in chaos by the following Monday. The so-called wedding event had gone viral far beyond internal social channels. National news picked it up. A trending hashtag, "The Mechanic Did It," was attached to think pieces, reaction videos, and editorials about racism, class, and the myth of meritocracy in corporate America. Catherine Hale was suspended immediately pending a formal investigation. But the damage was already irreversible. Investors were furious. Long-term contracts were at risk. A class action lawsuit led by a coalition of past employees like Yvonne Carter had been filed before sunrise on Tuesday. Jake tried to go silent, deleted all his accounts. But screenshots lived forever, and the damage he'd done wasn't digital. It was deeply human. He'd weaponized cruelty disguised as corporate banter, and now he was being investigated for obstruction, retaliation, and discriminatory conduct. But this wasn't just about consequences. It was about transformation. Malik, though, invited to press conferences and talk shows, remained grounded. He politely declined interviews, except for one local station, the same one where Catherine had laughed about his education level just days before. He wore the same overalls. He spoke with the same measured tone. And when the host asked, "What would you say to Catherine Hale today?" he paused before replying, "I hope she understands that the worst thing she did wasn't to me. It was to herself. She traded brilliance for bitterness. She could have led something beautiful, but she chose to gatekeep it instead." That interview was clipped, quoted, and shared more than any of the chaos that preceded it. Because in a world built on shouting, Malik's restraint was radical. But he wasn't done. On Thursday, he walked back into Veritas Motors, not through the back entrance where deliveries came in, but through the glass doors at the front, accompanied by Thomas Ridge, the newly appointed interim CEO. Ridge had been one of the few executives who'd stayed silent during the wedding stunt, but not because he agreed. He'd been watching, calculating, and after what he saw, he asked for a private meeting with Malik. "You didn't just repair an engine," Ridge had said in that meeting. "You exposed our rot. If we're going to survive as a company, we can't just fire the guilty. We have to rebuild who we are." And then he made the offer. Not a payout, not a promotion, a department, Innovation and Inclusion, led by Malik Evans, with full authority to redesign Veritas Motors' internal mentorship hiring and advancement systems. With a budget, with autonomy, with trust. Malik didn't say yes immediately. He walked the floor first, talked to workers who never got mentioned in quarterly reports, sat with young engineers who had ideas, but no allies. And when he returned to Ridge's office, he didn't talk about salaries or titles. He talked about legacy. "I'll do it," he said, "but only if I build something that outlives me." By Friday, the department was launched. Yvonne became the lead advisor. Lynn came back as Director of Technical Oversight. Professor Fields joined as an ethics auditor on contract. The first policy, a reverse mentorship program, pairing every new engineer with a field tech or mechanic for 3 months of hands-on experience before they were allowed to submit designs. Not as a test, but as a grounding. "We don't want to flatten hierarchy," Malik explained. "We want to elevate wisdom." And the results were immediate. Engines ran smoother. Workplaces got quieter in the best way. And for the first time in Veritas's history, a proposal written by a first-generation immigrant engineer was approved without modification, because someone took the time to listen. But Malik hadn't forgotten Catherine. When the dust settled, she reached out not to apologize, but to set the record straight. She tried to post a carefully worded reflection piece on LinkedIn, titled, "What I Learned About Leadership." It was flooded with comments calling out the hypocrisy, the damage the calculated PR spin. She deleted the post in under 12 hours. But not before Jalen took a screenshot. Malik saw it later that night, while they sat eating dinner. "She's still trying to rewrite it," Jalen muttered. Malik shook his head. "Let her. The people who matter already saw the truth." But what no one expected was what happened the next day. An email arrived in Malik's inbox from a high school teacher in Ohio. Then, a community college dean in Oakland. Then, a nonprofit founder in Atlanta. They had all watched the footage. They all had students, apprentices, kids who had Malik stories. And they wanted to know, "Can you help us build something like that here?" Malik closed his laptop, leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. This had never been about a motor. It was about momentum. And now it was moving. This had never been about a motor. It was about momentum. And now it was moving faster and farther than Malik had ever planned. What began in a cramped Detroit garage had rippled outward, reaching classroom startups and community centers across the country. He hadn't just exposed a system, he had become a blueprint for something better. But with momentum came weight, responsibility, and resistance that wasn't always loud but insidious. 3 weeks into his new role at Veritas Motors, Malik stood in front of a group of newly hired junior engineers, most of them women, immigrants, or first-generation college grads, giving a workshop on failure analysis. The room buzzed with nervous excitement. He wasn't reading from a script. He wasn't quoting theory. He was walking them through the exact process he'd used on the sabotaged engine observation, intuition, and pattern recognition. It wasn't flashy, but it was undeniable. As the session ended, one of the engineers, a quiet Nigerian woman named Temi, approached him with a trembling voice. "Mr. Evans, can I show you something?" She pulled out a schematic of a new cooling system she'd designed for an EV prototype. It was elegant, efficient. But her supervisor had rejected it without review, claiming it lacked commercial intuition. Malik raised an eyebrow. "Who's your supervisor?" She hesitated. "Mr. Langston." Langston, one of Catherine's old allies, still in his position, still smiling in meetings, still sending cold emails at 10:45 p.m. on Sundays. Malik looked Temi in the eye. "Leave the file with me. We're going to review it together." That night, he sat with Lynn and Yvonne, poring over Temi's design. Not only was it valid, it had the potential to improve thermal efficiency by nearly 8%. More importantly, her method of airflow modeling was unlike anything Veritas had ever documented. "She's brilliant," Lynn said flatly. And he buried it. Malik didn't respond. He was too busy pulling up Langston's email logs, something he now had access to as department lead. Within 5 minutes, the pattern appeared. Dozens of rejected proposals, all from engineers who didn't look like him. Most of them marked with vague dismissals, not aligned with department vision. Too experimental, lacks executive clarity. It was Catherine all over again, just quieter. The next morning, Malik walked straight into Thomas Ridge's office with a stack of printouts. "I need your support," he said, "and I need it without hesitation." Ridge didn't ask questions. He simply nodded. "Do what you have to do." That afternoon, Veritas Motors held a surprise company-wide town hall. Employees expected an update on product strategy. Instead, Malik walked on stage holding Temi's design in one hand and the rejection letter in the other. "This," he said, "holding both in the air is the difference between progress and preservation." He didn't name Langston. He didn't need to. But his message was clear. Excellence doesn't come dressed in pedigree. It comes in perseverance, in ideas that challenge comfort, in people who've been told, "not yet," their whole lives. The room was dead silent. Temi, sitting in the second row, began to cry. Langston resigned the next day. But something more important happened that weekend. Temi's cooling system was approved for prototyping. And Malik's Department Innovation and Inclusion launched its first external partnership, the LIFT program, a mentorship initiative connecting high school seniors from underrepresented backgrounds with Veritas engineers across the country. The pilot cities Detroit, Oakland, Atlanta, and Tulsa. Every city had a story. Every kid had a name. And Malik made it clear their first task wasn't to prove they belonged. It was to discover how far they could go if no one told them not to try. But not everyone celebrated this shift. That Sunday, Malik found a manila envelope on the windshield of his truck. No return address, no sender. Inside a flash drive. And a note that simply read, "You missed one." He inserted it into a secure terminal that night surrounded by Yvonne and Lynn. It contained surveillance footage, grainy but clear. A security cam inside Veritas's restricted R&D wing, dated 2 days before the engine was declared failed. Someone face partially obscured tweaking internal wiring with a duplicate ID badge. It wasn't Catherine. It wasn't Langston. It was someone still inside, still working, still sabotaging. Yvonne whispered, "This doesn't end with her, does it?" Malik didn't blink. "No," he said. "It never did." "No," Malik said. "It never did." The betrayal hadn't ended with Catherine or Langston. The sabotage was never just the act of one bitter engineer. It was systemic, embedded like corrosion beneath a polished frame. And now, with the flash drive in his hands, Malik realized the fight wasn't over. It had simply gone deeper, quieter. But so had he. Monday morning, the atmosphere at Veritas Motors was tense, palpably so. Malik walked into headquarters earlier than usual, a storm behind his eyes, flash drive secure in the pocket of his jacket. He wasn't rushing. He was waiting. Watching. He passed hallways filled with polished plaques and framed patent awards, and for the first time he didn't just see celebration. He saw omission, names missing, credits stolen. In the newly established Innovation and Inclusion War Room, Malik called a closed-door meeting with Yvonne Lynn and Professor Fields. He connected the flash drive to a private server. The grainy footage flickered across the monitor, a hooded figure, slim build, tampering with a core component inside the R&D wing 2 days before the engine was declared unsalvageable. The badge ID was obscured, but the movements were familiar. Too familiar. Lynn leaned forward. That walk, the way they handle tools, it's deliberate. Yvonne narrowed her eyes. That's someone who knows how to hide in plain sight. Professor Fields quietly began cross-referencing swipe card logs, internal access times, and equipment requests. Within 20 minutes, he landed on a pattern that made Malik's stomach turn. Every time a sabotage occurred, one name consistently logged into sensitive areas. Just prior to failure, Derek Maddox, Senior Systems Director. A man still in the building. A man who had once mentored Catherine. A man who had publicly praised Malik during the engine reveal, smiling, nodding, clapping. Malik stood up. Lock everything down. No alerts, no emails, no HR. He turned to Fields. You know someone at the DOJ, I know 3. By noon, Veritas's executive board had received a confidential request for cooperation from the Department of Justice. The Nature suspected intellectual property sabotage tied to Maddox, who allegedly shared modified versions of prototype designs with a competitor startup based in Denver, ironically, one that had filed suspiciously similar patents just weeks after Veritas projects failed. But Malik didn't go to the media. He didn't want noise. He wanted resolution. That afternoon, Derek Maddox was called into a private boardroom for a routine cross-team audit debrief. The walls were soundproofed. Cameras were off. Malik was already waiting. I won't waste your time, Malik began. You sabotaged projects. You buried careers. You took what wasn't yours and built a ladder with it. I want to know why. Derek's jaw tightened. You think I'd talk without a lawyer? Malik nodded slowly. No, I think you'll talk because this isn't about punishment. It's about understanding what made a man with everything to lose choose sabotage over collaboration. Silence. Then Derek cracked. He didn't confess with rage. He confessed with resentment. He told Malik about the changing landscape, about diversity hires getting attention, about feeling like he was becoming irrelevant. How Catherine had come to him with the plan, let them fail, naturally. All he had to do was push things over the edge. A cut wire here, a faulty capacitor there. The system would do the rest. Malik stared at him for a long time. You weren't afraid of irrelevance, he said finally. You were afraid of being equal. Derek didn't respond. But by evening, federal agents escorted him off the premises. News broke 2 days later, a quiet press release announcing that Veritas Motors was cooperating with a federal investigation into IP violations and internal misconduct. No names were listed, no drama. But inside Veritas, everything changed. The following week, Malik launched the Legacy Lab, a physical space inside company HQ, combining a workshop archive room and mentorship lounge. The walls displayed uncredited inventions, forgotten designs, stories of engineers whose voices were erased. And at the entrance, etched in steel, was a single quote, "Silence built this system. Truth will rebuild it." But perhaps the most powerful shift didn't happen at Veritas at all. It happened at Jalen's school. During career day, Malik sat quietly in the back as students presented their dream jobs: doctors, athletes, architects. Then Jalen stood up. My dad's a mechanic, he said simply. But not the kind you think. He told the story carefully, truthfully, of how his dad fixed something bigger than a machine. How he took every insult and turned it into fuel. He didn't scream. He didn't quit. He just kept showing up. And now people listen. The classroom was quiet. One teacher wiped away tears. And Malik. He didn't speak that day. He just nodded once to his son. Because this fight, this revolution was no longer his alone. It had become a movement, one that would outlive them both.